He didn't even raise his voice when he handed her the envelope. "Sign it. You've lived off me long enough." Ryan Cole stood in the doorway of the penthouse, blocking her way out like she was the intruder, not his wife of 6 years. Behind him, Vanessa leaned against the marble counter, calm, confident, already at home. Claire didn't argue, she didn't cry, not even when Ryan told security to escort her out with one suitcase, because 3 days earlier, she had quietly become something he could never imagine. And tonight he was throwing her out of a life that was never really his to begin with. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 days earlier, everything had shifted, just not in any way Ryan could see. Claire stood in the center of the living room, the envelope still unopened in her hands. It wasn't fear that kept her still. It was something heavier, something final. Ryan exhaled sharply, impatient. "I don't have all night, Claire." His tone was flat, like he was discussing a contract, not ending a marriage. That was how he'd been for the past year. Everything reduced to transactions, value, efficiency, return. Across the room, Vanessa watched Nest in silence, one arm resting on the back of the sofa like she belonged there, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Claire's eyes moved between them, slow and steady, no panic, no pleading. That unsettled Ryan more than anything else. "You're really not going to say anything?" he asked. Claire finally looked down at the papers. Divorce filings. Clean. Prepared. Already signed on his side. "I read faster when no one's talking," she said quietly. Vanessa let out a small laugh, soft but sharp. "Still playing calm. That's impressive." Claire didn't respond. She flipped a page. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let's not drag this out. You know this isn't working. It hasn't been for a long time." That part wasn't entirely untrue. What he didn't say was that he had already moved on. That the woman standing 10 feet away had been part of his life long before tonight. Claire had seen the signs, the late meetings, the careful distance, the way he stopped asking about her day, as if her life had become irrelevant. But she had stayed, not because she needed him, because she had wanted to believe he was still worth staying for. Ryan gestured toward the papers. "You'll be fine. I'll give you a settlement. Enough to get you started somewhere smaller." There it was, the quiet assumption that she had nothing, that everything she had came from him. Claire closed the folder gently. "Somewhere smaller," she repeated. Vanessa smiled. "Well, you're not exactly used to maintaining this kind of place on your own, are you?" Claire's gaze shifted to her, finally meeting her eyes fully. There was no anger there, no jealousy. Just recognition. "Congratulations," Claire said. "You don't seem surprised." Vanessa tilted her head. "Should I be?" Ryan cut in, impatient. "This isn't about her. This is about you signing those papers so we can both move on." Claire studied him for a moment. 6 years of marriage reduced to a deadline. "You've already moved on," she said. Ryan didn't deny it. Instead, he straightened, defensive. "I chose someone who understands my world, my pace, my goals." Vanessa's hand slipped lightly onto his arm, reinforcing the statement without words. Claire nodded once. "Of course you did." Silence stretched between them. Ryan misread it as defeat. He reached for his phone. "I already called downstairs. Security will help you pack what you need. One suitcase. The rest can be sorted later through legal." Claire didn't flinch, didn't react at all. That was the part Ryan couldn't process. "Are you even hearing me?" he snapped. Claire looked around the apartment slowly, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights, the marble surfaces Ryan had insisted on. The space she had lived in, maintained, quietly shaped around his life. She knew every corner of it, better than he ever did. "I hear you." Then she picked up the pen. Ryan watched closely as she signed, no hesitation, no negotiation. Vanessa's smile widened slightly. "That was easier than I expected," she said. Claire set the pen down. "For you," she replied. A knock sounded at the door. Security. Ryan exhaled, relieved. "Good. Let's keep this simple." Claire walked past him toward the hallway. Not rushed, not broken, just finished. One of the security guards glanced at her, something flickering in his expression before he looked away. Recognition, maybe, or confusion. Claire didn't stop to find out. She reached the elevator and pressed the button. Behind her, She could hear Vanessa's voice drifting through the open doorway. "Honestly, Ryan, you should done this months ago." Ryan laughed under his breath. "Yeah, I should have." The elevator doors opened. Claire stepped inside, holding only a single suitcase. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Calm, composed, untouched. In the pocket of her coat, her phone buzzed once. A name lit up the screen, Martin Ellison. She didn't answer, not yet. The elevator began to descend, and for the first time that night, Claire allowed herself the smallest exhale. Because the man who had just thrown her out had no idea whose name was actually tied to everything he thought he owned, and she wasn't ready to correct him. Not yet. Claire didn't step out onto the street right away. The lava doors stood just a few feet ahead, glass panels reflecting the city lights and the version of her life Ryan believed he had just erased. Behind her, the elevator had already disappeared back upstairs, carrying him and Vanessa into a future they thought they had secured. Her phone buzzed again. Martin Ellison. She stared at the name for a moment, then slipped the phone back into her pocket without answering. Not yet. The doorman glanced at her, hesitant. He had seen her come and go for years, always beside Ryan, always quiet, always unnoticed, in a thin way that now felt deliberate. Tonight, something in his posture shifted. Not pity, not curiosity. Recognition. "Mom, do you need assistance?" he asked carefully. Claire adjusted her grip on the suitcase. "No, I'm fine." She walked past him before he could say anything else. The cold air hit her face, sharp and immediate. It grounded her, pulled her fully into the moment. No more pretending this wasn't happening. She moved down the sidewalk, heels steady against the pavement, even as the weight of what had just happened settled in her chest. 6 years of marriage, reduced to a signature and a suitcase. But what stayed with her wasn't the divorce. It was the way Ryan had said it. "You've lived off me long enough." Claire let out a quiet breath. That sentence had been building for years. It lived in every decision he made for her, every time he dismissed her opinion, every time he corrected her in front of others, as if she were a guest in his life instead of his partner. He had needed her to be small, and she had let him believe she was. A car slowed at the curb beside her. Claire. She turned slightly. It wasn't a rideshare. A black sedan idled quietly, the driver already stepping out, opening the rear door without asking. Claire didn't move. "I didn't call for a car," she said. "You didn't need to," the driver replied, his tone respectful, almost careful. "Mr. Ellison asked me to bring you." Claire's eyes flickered, just for a second. So Martin had anticipated this. Of course he had. She looked back at the building once more. The penthouse lights were still on. Shadows moved behind the glass. Ryan, pacing. Vanessa probably pouring herself a drink, already settling into a space she thought she had claimed. Claire turned away. Then she got into the car. The door closed softly behind her, sealing off the night. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The city passed by in quiet reflections. Restaurants, late-night offices, people living lives that had nothing to do with hers. "Where to, Mom?" the driver asked. Claire hesitated. Not because she didn't know. Because saying it out loud made it real. "The Langford," she said finally. "A hotel. Temporary. Neutral." The driver nodded and pulled into traffic. Her phone buzzed again. "This time," she answered. Claire Martin's voice came through immediately. Calm, measured, exactly the same as it had been 3 days ago in his office. "I assume the situation has escalated. That's one way to put it," she said. A brief pause. "Are you safe?" "Yes, good." Another pause. "I took the liberty of arranging transportation. I wasn't certain you'd accept it." Claire leaned her head back against the seat. "You were certain. I prefer to be prepared." That sounded like him. She closed her eyes for a second. "He served me divorce papers. I expected as much," Martin said quietly. "The timing aligns with what we uncovered." Claire didn't ask what he meant by that. "Not yet. He thinks I have nothing," she said instead. Martin's tone didn't change, but there was something under it now. That belief is advantageous. Claire opened her eyes, staring out at the passing lights. "For who? For you." Silence filled the car again. 3 days ago, she had sat across from Martin in a quiet office, listening as he explained numbers so large they barely felt real. Assets, holdings, structures built over decades. All of it tied to a name she had only ever associated with distance. Now that same system was moving quietly around her. anticipating her needs before she voiced them, and Ryan had just told her she was worthless. "Has anything changed?" she asked. "No," Martin replied. "The terms remain the same. 30 days of full discretion, no disclosure, no direct action that would compromise the integrity of the trust." Claire's grip tightened slightly on her coat. 30 days. She had known that when she signed. At the time, it had felt abstract, a formality, a condition attached to something she hadn't even fully processed. Now it felt like a constraint. "You're asking me to let this play out," she said. "I'm asking you to observe," Martin corrected. "Your grandfather believed this period would provide clarity." Claire let out a quiet, humorless breath. "Clarity about what? About who people are when they believe you have nothing to offer." The words settled between them. Claire looked down at her hand. No ring. She had taken it off weeks ago, not because she had planned this, because she had already started to understand what the marriage had become. "I've seen enough," she said softly. "Have you?" Martin asked. She didn't answer right away, because part of her knew she hadn't. Not fully, not completely. The car slowed as it approached the hotel. "Your suite is prepared," Martin continued. "You'll have full privacy. And Claire," she waited, "if you choose to act early, I won't stop you. But you should understand, once you reveal your position, you lose the advantage of being underestimated." Claire stared straight ahead. Ryan's voice echoed again in her mind. "You've lived off me long enough." She stepped out of the car. The hotel doors opened before she reached them. Inside, everything was quiet, polished, controlled, a temporary life. She's checked in under her own name. No hesitation, no hiding, but no explanations either. In the elevator, alone again, she finally took her phone out. There was one new message, not from Martin, from an unknown. She opened it. A photo loaded slowly. Ryan and Vanessa. Not tonight. Weeks ago, at a private dinner. Close. Intimate. Unmistakable. Below it, a single line of text. "He's been planning this longer than you think." Claire stared at the screen. Her expression didn't change, but something inside her shifted. Not shock, not pain. Precision. Because if that was true, then tonight hadn't been impulsive. It had been calculated, and that meant she wasn't just dealing with betrayal, she was dealing with strategy. Claire locked the phone, and for the first time since she walked out of that penthouse, she began to plan. Claire didn't sleep that night. The suite was quiet, immaculate, every detail designed for comfort, but none of it felt like rest. The silence pressed in too close, filling the space where noise used to be, Ryan's late-night calls, the low hum of the city through penthouse glass, even the subtle tension she had learned to ignore. Now it was just her, and the truth sitting heavy in her chest. She stood by the window, the city stretching endlessly below. Somewhere out there, Ryan was pouring another drink, replaying the scene in his head, convinced he had finally taken control of his life. Claire let out a slow breath. He had no idea how much of his life had never been his to control. Her phone rested on the table behind her. The message still open, the photo, the timing, the implication. "He's been planning this longer than you think." Claire turned back and picked up the phone again, studying the image more carefully this time. The angle wasn't accidental. It had been taken from a distance, through glass, likely by someone who knew exactly what they were capturing, not gossip. Evidence. Her thumb hovered over the number, then she called. It rang once. Twice. On the third ring, the line connected. Claire Morrison. A calm voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call." She didn't sit. She didn't soften. "Who is this?" A brief pause, like he was deciding how much to reveal. "Someone who believes you've been underestimated for far too long." Claire's grip tightened slightly on the phone. "You sent the photo, yes." "Why?" "Because you deserved to know the full timeline." Claire's jaw set. "I already know enough." "Do you?" he asked quietly. "Do you know when Ryan started moving money out of your joint accounts? Or when Vanessa was added to internal company dinners as his guest instead of you? Or how long they've been positioning themselves as a pair in front of the people who matter?" The words didn't hit like a shock. They landed like confirmation, pieces, sliding into place. Claire walked slowly toward the table, setting the phone on speaker but keeping her hand close. "Say what you called to say." Another pause, longer this time. "Then I work in risk analysis. Contracted by firms that care about exposure, Financial, reputational, internal. Ryan Cole's name crossed my desk months ago. Claire's eyes flickered. Why would he? Because he's ambitious, the man replied simply, and ambition tends to leave a trail, especially when it's paired with shortcuts. Claire didn't interrupt. You were never part of his long-term plan, he continued. Not once he believed you couldn't elevate him further. The divorce? That wasn't emotional. It was strategic. That word again. Strategic. Claire leaned against the table, steadying herself. And you're telling me this because the situation changed 3 days ago. Silence. Claire didn't respond. She didn't need to. You inherited something significant, he said carefully. That shifted your position, not publicly, but structurally. Claire's voice stayed even. You're making assumptions. I don't deal in assumptions, he replied. I deal in patterns. And right now, the pattern suggests you're sitting on leverage you haven't used. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then you should also recognize when to stay out of something that isn't yours. A faint exhale came through the line. Not quite a laugh. Fair enough. Then let me give you something useful before I disappear. Claire waited. Ryan's promotion review is next week, he said. Senior management is already leaning in his favor. Vanessa's been instrumental in that, networking, positioning, making sure his name stays visible. Claire felt a quiet shift inside her, not anger. Alignment. And, she asked, and if you're planning to remain invisible, you should know that the company he's climbing inside isn't as stable as it looks. Claire went still. Explain. There's a board review coming, he said. Quiet. Internal. Triggered by a restructuring of major shareholding interests. Most of the executives don't even know the full scope yet. Claire's pulse slowed. Not fear. And Ryan? She asked. He doesn't know, the man said. He thinks this is his moment, that everything is finally aligning. Claire looked out at the city again. Everything is finally aligning. For him. For her. For something much bigger than either of them had acknowledged yet. Why tell me this? She asked again. More quietly now. A pause. Then, because if you wait too long, you won't be observing anymore. Claire didn't respond. You'll be reacting, he finished. The line went dead. Claire stared at the phone for a long second before ending the call. The room felt different now. Sharper. Defined. She walked back to the window, but this time she wasn't just looking. She was calculating. Ryan thought he had removed her from the equation. Vanessa thought she had stepped into a better version of Claire's life. And somewhere inside a corporate structure built on decisions neither of them fully understood, something was shifting. Claire moved back to the table and opened her laptop. The login screen appeared instantly. She hesitated for half a second. Then entered the credentials Martin had given her. The interface loaded slowly, clean, structured, layered. Not a personal account, not a bank. Something's holdings, entities, subsidiaries. Names she recognized, and some she didn't. Her eyes scanned quickly. Real estate portfolios, investment branches, corporate structures nested inside each other like a map designed to hide itself. Then she saw it. Richardson Holdings Group. Claire's fingers hovered over the trackpad. She clicked. A new window opened. Executive overview. Board structure. Voting shares. Her name wasn't listed. Not directly. But another entity with Thornton Trust. Controlling interest. Claire sat back slowly. Ryan worked for a company he believed was his ladder. A ladder she now held at the top. She didn't smile. She didn't react. She just kept reading. Revenue streams, expansion proposals, internal communications. Then a line caught her attention. Upcoming board session, confidential attendances required her eyes fixed on it. Date, time, location. Claire's reflection stared back at her from the dark screen. He had thrown her out of a building she owned, and now he's preparing to present himself. Inside a company she controlled. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Martin, she answered. I assume you've started reviewing the files, he said. Yes. A brief silence. Then you've reached the part where things stop being theoretical. Claire glanced back at the board session notice. Yes, she said quietly. Martin's tone shifted, just slightly. Then you should know, attendance is not optional. Claire's gaze sharpened. For who? She asked. A pause. Then, calm and clear, for you. By morning, Claire had already built a timeline, not in her head, on paper. She sat at the small desk in the hotel suite, her laptop open, Documents arranged with a precision that hadn't existed in her life for years. Every detail she could remember, every shift in Ryan's behavior, every moment that once felt like confusion now started to make sense. Late nights that weren't about work. Sudden networking dinners she wasn't invited to. Vanessa's name appearing more often, always justified, always harmless, until it wasn't. Claire leaned back slightly, studying the pattern she had mapped out. It wasn't chaos, it was progression. A transition from marriage to replacement. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. She stared at it for a long second before opening it. Where are you staying? No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what he had done. Just control. Claire set the phone down without replying. 5 minutes later, another message came. You should sign the papers quickly. Let's not make this messy. Her lips pressed together. Messy. That word lingered, as if throwing someone out of their home wasn't already that. As if betrayal only counted when it became inconvenient. She picked up the phone again, typed a single response, then paused, deleted it. No, silence wasn't weakness. Right now, it was leverage. She set the phone aside again and turned back to her laptop. The Richardson Holdings file was still open. She scrolled further down. Internal communications logs. Executive summaries. Vanessa Harper. Her name appeared more often than it should have. Claire clicked. A profile opened. Consultant. Strategic development. No formal executive title. Yet her presence in internal discussions was unusually consistent. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. She pulled up meeting attendance records. Vanessa had been present in rooms she technically didn't belong in. Private strategy sessions. Pre-board briefings. Ryan hadn't just been having an affair. He had been integrating Vanessa into his professional world, positioning her. Claire sat very still. This wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It was planned. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ryan. Don't drag this out, Claire. You don't have the resources to fight me. She stared at the screen. Then, slowly, she let out a quiet breath. That sentence, that assumption, it was the foundation of everything he had done, and everything he was about to lose. Claire closed the message and opened another tab. Legal structure. Ownership layers. She didn't need to understand everything. Just enough. Enough to see Susie she stood. Enough to know what was real. The Thornton Trust appeared again. Indirect control. Majority voting influence. Not public, not obvious, but absolute. Claire's fingers hovered over the trackpad. She could act technically. But not yet. The 30-day clause wasn't just a restriction, it was a filter, and Ryan was still revealing exactly who he was under it. She closed the laptop halfway, just enough to pause the screen, then stood. She needed movement. The suite felt too controlled, too quiet, too far from the life she had just walked out of. Claire grabbed her coat and left. The street outside was busy now, morning traffic, people moving with purpose, no one looking twice at her. It was strange. How invisible she had become so quickly. 6 years in one world. Gone in a single night, she walked without direction, at first letting the rhythm of the city carry her. Then she stopped across the street, a glass-front restaurant, familiar. Ryan had brought her there once, not for her, for a client dinner. She remembered sitting quietly while he spoke. Laughing at things that weren't funny, adjusting her posture, because he had once told her she looked too relaxed in professional settings. Claire stared at the reflection in the glass. Same woman, different position. A notification lit up her phone again. This time it wasn't Ryan, it was Martin. Check your email, urgent. Claire opened it immediately. A secure message, encrypted attachment. She downloaded it, opened it. A document appeared. Board session briefing. Her eyes scanned quickly. Agenda items, strategic restructuring. Then executive promotion review. Ryan Colclaire's gaze sharpened. She read every line. Performance highlights, projected trajectory, internal endorsements. Vanessa's name appeared again. Supporting evaluation. Claire let out a slow breath. They were building him up, publicly, internally. Positioning him as valuable, as indispensable. And none of them knew the structure above them had already shifted. Her phone rang. Martin, she answered. You've seen it, he said. Yes. They're accelerating his promotion, Martin continued, which suggests they don't yet understand the implications of the trust transition. Claire crossed the street slowly, her focus still on the document. Meaning? Meaning decisions are being made under outdated assumptions, he said. That creates exposure. Claire stopped walking. And if I do nothing? Then he rises, Martin said plainly. And when the structure updates, the fall is more complicated. Claire closed her eyes briefly, not out of overwhelm, out of clarity. Attendance is required, Martin added, but participation is your choice. She opened her eyes again. Ryan thought he was winning. Vanessa thought she had stepped into something stable. The company thought it was promoting the right person. And Claire was standing in the middle of all of it, unseen, unaccounted for, still underestimated. I'm not ready to walk into that room yet, she said. I didn't think you were, Martin replied. A pause. Then, more carefully, but you should be aware of one more thing. Claire waited. There's a secondary review scheduled, he said. Not public, not listed in that document. Her grip tightened slightly around the phone. For what? Another pause. Then, for ownership verification. Claire's gaze lifted slowly toward the glass building across the street, reflection staring back at her. Still calm, still composed, but no longer uncertain. Who's initiating it? She asked. Martin didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. The board. Claire went still. Because that meant one thing. Somewhere was starting to question who actually held the power. And if that process moved faster than expected, her identity wouldn't stay hidden much longer. Ryan didn't wait long. By noon, Claire's phone was lighting up again. Calls this time, not messages. She watched the screen from across the room, sitting at the edge of the bed with the laptop still open beside her. His name flashed again and again, persistent, impatient, not worried, annoyed. That difference told her everything. She let it ring out, again and again. On the fifth attempt, it stopped. A minute later, a new message appeared. If you think ignoring me gives you leverage, you're wrong. This is simple, Claire. Sign the papers. Claire stared at the words, then reached for her phone slowly. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened the secure email Martin had sent earlier and reread the board briefing. Executive Promotion Review. Ryan Cole. Her eyes lingered on the performance summary. Growth projections. Leadership evaluation. Strategic positioning. He had built this version of himself all carefully. Not just for the company, for perception, for power. And Claire realized something quietly unsettling. Ryan didn't think he was lying. He believed the version of himself he had created. The one who earned everything. The one who carried everything. The one who had the right to discard anything that didn't elevate him, including her. Claire closed the file and stood. She picked up her coat again, but this time she didn't hesitate. She had somewhere to go. The Richardson Technologies headquarters stood in glass and steel, reflecting the city like it owned part of it. Claire paused across the street, taking it in. She had been here before. Not often, only when Ryan insisted. Corporate events, holiday gatherings, moments where she was expected to stand beside him, polished and quiet, an accessory that confirmed his stability without drawing attention away from him. She remembered how he used to introduce her. My wife, Claire, never more, never less. Now she stood there alone. No invitation, no announcement. And yet, she knew more about what was happening inside that building than most of the people working there. Claire crossed the street. The lobby doors opened automatically. Inside, everything was as she remembered. Minimalist, controlled, professional. People moved with purpose, badges visible, conversations clipped and efficient. Claire walked in without slowing. The receptionist looked up. Can I help you? Claire met her gaze calmly. I'm here to review internal materials, the woman hesitated. Do you have an appointment? Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed a card on the counter. Not flashy, not branded loudly, just a simple black card. The receptionist picked it up, glanced at it, then her posture changed, subtly, but unmistakably. Of course, she said quickly. Let me notify that won't be necessary, Claire replied, her tone still even. I won't take long. The receptionist nodded, almost instinctively. Of course. Claire took the card back and walked past her. No one stopped her. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the space, not the people, the access. Doors that opened, eyes that shifted. The quiet recalibration of how she was perceived, without a single explanation. She moved toward the elevator bank, pressing the button for executive floors. For a moment, she stood alone. Then someone stepped beside her. A man in his 40s, tailored suit, expression sharp. He glanced at her briefly, then did a double take. Recognition flickered. Not personal, professional. "Miss Morrison?" he said carefully. Claire turned her head slightly. "Yes." His posture straightened instantly. "I wasn't aware you were." He stopped himself, recalibrated. "Do you need assistance?" Claire studied him for a second. He wasn't guessing. He knew something. Not everything, but enough. "No," she said. "I'm just reviewing." He nodded quickly, of course. The elevator arrived. They stepped in together. Silence filled the space, but it wasn't empty. It was charged. The man didn't press a floor. He waited. Claire reached forward and selected one herself. Executive level. The doors closed. "You're here ahead of schedule," he said after a moment. Claire's eyes shifted toward him. "Am I?" He hesitated, then nodded slightly. "The board session isn't until next week." Claire said nothing, because that wasn't what she was here for. The elevator opened. The hallway was quieter, carpeted, more insulated. Claire stepped out first. The man followed, keeping a respectful distance now. "Is Mr. Ellison expecting you?" he asked. Claire stopped, turned. "No," she said simply. Another recalibration. Another shift. The man nodded. Understood. He didn't ask anything else. He stepped aside, giving her space to move. Claire forward. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Every step deliberate. Every movement controlled. She reached a glass-walled conference room. Inside, a small group of executives sat around the table, papers spread out, screens active. Ryan stood at the head, confident, focused, explaining something on the display. Vanessa sat near the front, leaning slightly forward, fully engaged. They looked like a unit, like they belonged there. Claire stood outside the glass for a moment, unseen, watching. Ryan gestured toward a projection, and once we finalize the restructuring, the expansion will position us ahead of. He stopped. Not because of her, because someone inside had turned, followed her reflection, then another, and another. The room shifted. Ryan frowned slightly, glancing toward the glass, and saw her. For a second, his expression didn't register, then it changed. Confusion, annoyance, a flicker of something else. "What is she doing here?" Vanessa murmured, not bothering to lower her voice. Claire heard it, every word. Ryan stepped away from the table, walking toward the door. Fast, controlled, angry. He opened it sharply. "You can't just walk in here," he said, low and tight. "This is a closed meeting." Claire didn't move. "Didn't step," she said. His jaw tightened. "Then leave." The room behind him had gone silent. Executives watching, waiting, assessing. Claire's gaze shifted past Ryan, to the table, to the documents, to the people who were now looking at her with something new in their eyes. Not dismissal, not confusion. Recognitions, small, subtle, but growing. Claire looked back at Ryan, still angry, still certain, still completely unaware. "I won't stay long," she said calmly. Ryan stepped closer. "That's not your decision anymore." Claire held his gaze. And for the first time since he handed her those papers, she didn't look like the woman he had thrown out. She looked like someone who had walked into the wrong room, only if you didn't know who actually owned it. Behind him, one of the executives shifted, then spoke, quiet, careful. "Ryan, maybe we should—" Ryan didn't turn. "Stay out of this!" The tension snapped tight. Claire didn't react, but she saw it. The hesitation, the crack, and she understood something clearly now. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about everything around him, starting to realize he might not be as powerful as he believed. Claire took one step forward. Not into the room, just enough to close the distance between them. "Finish your meeting," she said quietly. Ryan blinked, thrown off for half a second. "What?" Her voice stayed calm. "I said finish it." Behind him, silence deepened, because the way she said it wasn't a request. It was control. Ryan stared at her, searching for something. Weakness, emotion, anything familiar. He found nothing, just calm, just certainty. Claire stepped back, turned, and walked away. She didn't look back. But behind her, the room didn't recover. Not immediately, because for the first time, someone had walked into Ryan's world and made it feel unstable. Claire reached the elevator and pressed the button. Her reflection stared back at her in the metal doors. Composed, unshaken, but inside everything had shifted. Her phone buzzed again. "Martin," she answered. You went in, he said. Yes. A pause. Then they've just moved up the ownership verification review. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. To when? Martin's voice dropped. Tomorrow morning. The elevator doors slid open. Claire stepped inside, because now waiting wasn't an option anymore. Claire didn't go back to the hotel right away. She stayed in the elevator a second longer than necessary, letting the doors close, before pressing the ground floor. The silence inside felt different now, not empty, not uncertain, focused. Tomorrow morning. Martin's words kept repeating in her head. Ownership verification. Moved up. That meant pressure. Not just on her, on them. Someone had noticed something. Or someone had asked a question they shouldn't have. Claire stepped out into the lobby again, slower this time. The same receptionist looked up and immediately straightened. Miss Morrison, she said almost reflexively. Claire didn't stop walking, but she nodded once. That was enough. Outside the city felt sharper. Louder, real. 3 days ago she had been invisible in it. Now pieces of it were quietly rearranging around her. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ryan. Unknown number. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then answered. Claire Morrison. A pause. Then a woman's voice, precise and controlled. This is Amanda Reyes from Internal Compliance. I believe you visited the executive floor earlier today. Claire didn't react outwardly. Yes. Another pause. Careful now. We'd like to confirm the nature of your access. Claire stepped toward the curb, away from the building. You already know the nature of my access. She silenced. Not denial, not confusion. Recognition. Amanda adjusted her tone slightly. Then you understand why this needs to be formally reviewed. Claire did understand. Legal ownership, especially through layered trusts, didn't operate on assumptions. It required verification, documentation, alignment, especially when power shifted without warning. When is the review scheduled? Claire asked, even though she already knew. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., of course. Claire looked back at the building, at the glass that hid everything and revealed nothing. I'll be there, she said. Amanda exhaled, almost quietly. Thank you. The call ended. Claire lowered her phone, so it had begun. Not the reveal, not yet, but the process that made it inevitable. Behind her, a car door slammed somewhere down the street. People moved past her, unaware of anything changing. Claire walked, not toward the hotel, toward a quieter street, toward space to think, because for the first time since everything shifted, she wasn't reacting anymore. She was choosing. Her phone buzzed again. Ryan. She stopped, looked at the name, then answered. What? Nice. His voice came through immediately, sharp, controlled anger, barely contained. You think you can just show up at my office like that? Claire didn't raise her voice. I wasn't there for you. A beat. That threw him off. Then what the hell were you doing there? Claire let the silence stretch just long enough to matter. Observing. Ryan let out a short, disbelieving breath. Observing what? You don't belong there, Claire. There it was again. That certainty. That complete conviction that she was outside his world. Claire leaned slightly against a building. Steady. You keep saying that, she said. Because it's true. Claire almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was consistent. And consistency made people predictable. You should focus on your meeting, she said instead. I am focusing on it, he snapped. Which is why I don't need you showing up and embarrassing me, embarrassing him. Not humiliating her, not throwing her out, not replacing her in front of colleagues, embarrassing him. Claire closed her eyes for a second, just long enough to feel it. Then she let it go. That's not why you're distracted, she said quietly. Ryan didn't answer immediately. Because she was right. Something had shifted in that room. He had felt it, didn't understand it, but he had felt it. You don't know what you're talking about, he said finally, but the edge had dulled. Claire didn't push. Not yet. Sign the papers, he said again, more controlled now. Let's end this cleanly, as if 6 years could be reduced to paperwork and convenience. Claire opened her eyes. Send them to my attorney, she said. Another pause. Sharp this time. You have an attorney? He asked. Claire didn't answer the question. From now on, everything goes through legal. Ryan's silence stretched longer. Because that didn't fit his version of her. The woman who avoided conflict. The woman who deferred. The woman who depended. You're overcomplicating this, he said, but it sounded thinner now. No, Claire replied. I'm clarifying it. She ended the call before he could respond. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing, not shaking, not breaking, just steady. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the folder Martin had given her. She opened it. Not everything, just one page, property holdings, structured through layered entities, names she recognized, locations she didn't expect. Then she found it, the line she had seen before. But now it meant something different. The building, Ryan's building, not his, never his. Claire closed the folder slowly, and this time when she looked at the city, she didn't feel displaced. She felt positioned. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Martin. It's accelerating. There's internal pressure from the board. Someone flagged irregular authority claims tied to Ryan's division. Claire read it twice. Irregular authority claims. He was already overstepping, acting like something was his when it wasn't. Claire typed back. Can he be stopped before tomorrow? The response came quickly. No, but it can be contained. Claire stared at the word. Contained. Not exposed. Not yet. Good. Because tomorrow wasn't just about proving ownership. It was about timing, about control, about making sure the truth didn't just surface, but landed where it mattered. She slipped the folder back into her bag, then started walking again. This time, toward the hotel. Not because she needed to hide, but because she needed to prepare. Upstairs, in the quiet of the room, she set everything out on the small desk. Lap, folder, phone. She opened the files Martin had sent. Board structure, voting rights, share distribution. Her name wasn't visible. Not directly. Layered, protected, intentional. But the authority was clear. Final approvals, strategic overrides, executive review triggers, including one scheduled for tomorrow. Claire leaned back slightly. Ryan didn't know. Not about the review. Not about the ownership. Not about how close everything was to shifting. He still thought he was moving forward. Getting promoted. Building power. Replacing what he no longer needed. Claire closed the laptop, then picked up her phone one last time. Not to call Martin. Not to respond to Ryan. To open a different contact, one she hadn't used in years. She hesitated, just for a second, then pressed call. The line rang once, twice, then Miss Morrison. A familiar voice answered, calm and precise. I was wondering when you'd reach out. Claire's grip tightened slightly. I need confirmation, she said. A pause. Then, you already have it. Claire exhaled slowly. Then I need enforcement. The voice didn't hesitate this time. Tomorrow, we'll handle that. Claire ended the call. And for the first time since she walked out of that penthouse, she allowed herself to feel something close to certainty. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. Tomorrow wasn't about proving who she was. It was about making sure no one could ignore it anymore. Across the city, in a glass office still filled with tension he couldn't explain, Ryan checked his phone again. No new messages, no control regained. And for reasons he couldn't name, that bothered him more than her silence ever had. Ryan barely slept. He woke before his alarm, staring at the ceiling of the penthouse that still felt like proof of everything he had built. Or at least, everything he believed he had built. Vanessa was still asleep beside him, one arm draped across his chest like she already belonged there, like nothing had shifted. But something had. He felt it the moment he walked into the office the day before. The hesitation, the looks, the slight delay when people answered him, subtle but wrong. Ryan sat up, running a hand through his hair. He checked his phone. No new messages, no confirmations, nothing from upper management, nothing from the board. That irritated him more than anything. Because he was supposed to be moving up. He had been promised that. Vanessa stirred behind him. You're up early. Big day, he said, already getting out of bed. She watched him for a moment, then smiled. You've got this. After today, there's no reason they won't finalize your promotion. Ryan nodded. That was the plan. It still was. It had to be. Downstairs, the city was already moving when he arrived at the office. But the energy inside the building felt different. More controlled. More watchful. He walked through the lobby with his usual confidence, expecting the usual nods, the usual recognition. He still got them. But something was missing. Certainty. In the elevator, he checked his reflection. Sharp suit. Clean lines, everything in place, exactly who he had worked to become. When the doors opened to the executive floor, the tension was immediate. Not loud, not obvious, but present. People stopped conversations when he passed, not out of respect, out of caution. Ryan frowned slightly but kept walking. Inside the conference room, Vanessa was already there, reviewing documents. She looked up, her expression tightening for a split second before smoothing over. "You feel it too?" he asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes," she said quietly. "Something's off." Ryan set his folder down on the table. Internal politics. It happens. Vanessa didn't respond right away. Because that wasn't what it felt like. It felt like something had already changed. They just didn't know what. At exactly 9, the door opened. But it wasn't the usual assistant or coordinator. 2 people stepped in first, one from legal, one from compliance. That alone was unusual. Then more followed. Senior executives, board representatives, people who didn't attend routine meetings. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. "What is this?" he asked, trying to keep his tone even. No one answered him directly. Instead, they took their seats. Quietly, deliberately, Vanessa shifted beside him. This wasn't on the schedule. "No," Ryan said. "It wasn't." The last person entered the room without urgency. But the moment he stepped in, the entire atmosphere changed. Martin, Ryan recognized him immediately. Not personally, but by reputation. Legal advisor tied to ownership structures. Someone who didn't show up unless something significant was happening. Ryan straightened slightly. Now this made sense. A high-level review, probably tied to expansion approvals, still within his control. Martin didn't sit right away. He placed a folder on the table, then looked around the room once, measuring. "Thank you for attending on short notice," he said. His voice was calm, controlled, neutral, but it carried weight. Ryan leaned back slightly, projecting confidence. "If this is about the expansion proposal, I'm prepared to present." Martin glanced at him, just briefly, not dismissive, but not impressed either. "That will not be necessary. Not yet." Ryan's expression tightened. Vanessa shifted again, subtly closer to him. Martin opened the folder. "Before any strategic approvals can proceed, we need to clarify authority alignment across this division." Ryan frowned. "Authority alignment?" "Yes." The word landed heavier than it should have. Ryan leaned forward slightly. "My authority is already defined. I've been leading this division for interim leadership," Martin corrected, without raising his voice. The room went still. Ryan's jaw tightened. "That distinction is irrelevant," he said. "I've delivered results. The board knows that." "Results are not in question," Martin replied calmly. "Authority is." Vanessa spoke this time. "Are you suggesting there's been a mistake in the chain of command?" Martin didn't look at her. "Not a mistake," he said. "An assumption." Ryan felt something shift in his chest, not fear, not yet, but pressure. "What assumption?" he asked. Martin closed the folder, then rested his hands lightly on the table. "That the individual exercising operational control is also the one holding final authority." Not confusion. Tension. Ryan let out a short breath. "That's how this works?" "No," Martin said quietly. "That's how it appears to work." The difference hit harder than Ryan expected. Vanessa glanced at him, just for a second. For reassurance, for confirmation. Ryan held steady. "Then clarify it," he said. "Who exactly holds this so-called final authority?" Martin didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room instead, at the board members, at compliance, at legal. All of them already knew. Ryan realized that in that moment, whatever this was, he was the only one in the room and catching up. Martin reached for another document. "Ownership in this organization is structured through layered entities," he began. "Trusts, holding companies, legal protections designed to ensure continuity and control." Ryan forced himself to stay still. He knew this. Everyone at his level did. It wasn't new information, but the way Martin was saying it, it wasn't just explanation, it was preparation. For the past several years, Martin continued. Operational decisions have been made under the assumption that authority aligned with visible leadership. Ryan's fingers curled slightly against the table. Vanessa leaned closer again. "Just get to the point," she whispered under her breath. Martin heard it anyway. He looked up, and for the first time, his gaze sharpened. "The point," he said, "is that this assumption is now under review." Ryan's heartbeat slowed, not sped up. Slowed, because something inside him was starting to piece together. Not fully, but enough to feel wrong. "You're saying someone else," he began. Martin raised a hand slightly. "Verification is ongoing," he said. Until it is complete, no new authority claims will be recognized. Authority claims. Ryan felt it now. Clear. Cold. This wasn't about policy. Vanessa spoke again. Sharper this time. This is ridiculous. Ryan has been acting in this for months. You can't just pause. We can, Martin said, cutting through her without raising his voice. And we have. Silence fell again. Thicker now, heavier. Ryan looked around the room, at faces that didn't meet his eyes, at people who suddenly weren't on his side, and for the first time he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Uncertainty. What triggered this, he asked. Martin didn't hesitate this time. A discrepancy. Ryan's stomach tightened. In what? Martin's gaze held his in authority. Another pause. In ownership. The word didn't explode. It settled, quiet, dangerous. Ryan leaned back slowly because now he understood just enough to feel the ground shift beneath him. Not collapse. Not yet. But shift. And somewhere in the back of his mind, unwanted, irrational, impossible, a thought surfaced. Claire. He pushed it away immediately, because that didn't make sense. It couldn't. She had nothing. She was nothing. Verification will conclude shortly, Martin said, closing the folder again. Until then, all executive actions are suspended. Ryan didn't move, didn't speak, because something was coming. He could feel it. And for the first time since he handed her those divorce papers, he wasn't in control of what happened next. Ryan didn't speak when the meeting ended. He walked out of the conference room with controlled steps, but inside, something was cracking in ways he didn't fully understand yet. Vanessa caught up with him in the hallway. What the hell was that? He didn't answer right away, because he didn't have one. They moved into his office, the door closing behind them with a quiet click that felt louder than it should. Vanessa turned to him immediately. This isn't normal. Legal doesn't just walk in and freeze executive authority unless what? Ryan cut in, sharper than he intended. She hesitated. Unless something's wrong at the ownership level. Ryan let out a short breath, pacing once across the room. There is nothing wrong with ownership. This is a structural company. Layers, trusts, investors. That's how these things work. Then why are they reviewing it now? That question hung between them. Ryan stopped moving. Because that was the problem. Timing. Everything had been moving forward. His promotion, his control, his position. And then suddenly everything paused. Not gradually. Not logically. All at once, Vanessa crossed her arms. You need to find out who triggered this. I will, Ryan said. But even as he said it, he knew something wasn't adding up, because triggers didn't just appear. They came from somewhere, or someone. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. An internal email, marked high priority. He opened it immediately. Subject line, temporary suspension of executive authority. Pending verification. Ryan's jaw tightened as he read. All senior-level approvals required additional authorization. All strategic decisions paused. All operational controls subject to review. Until further notice. Vanessa stepped closer. What does it say? He handed her the phone. She scanned it quickly, her expression shifting. This is serious, she said quietly. I know, Ryan replied. But what he didn't say was this: he had never been shut out like this before. Not even early in his career. This wasn't a delay, it was a removal, temporary. But real. Vanessa handed the phone back. This doesn't happen without someone higher stepping in. Ryan didn't respond, because that was exactly what Martin had implied. Final authority. Someone above visible leadership. Someone who hadn't been involved until now. Ryan turned toward his desk, opening his laptop. I'll pull internal records. Ownership structure. See what changed. Vanessa watched him for a second. You think this is about shares? It has to be, he said. Authority ties back to equity. But as he started digging through internal files, something became clear almost immediately. Nothing had changed. Not recently. The ownership structure looked the same as it always had. Layered. Complicated. Shielded behind multiple entities. Exactly the way high-value assets were designed to be. Ryan frowned. Because if nothing had changed, then why now? Vanessa leaned over his shoulder. Anything? No, he said. That's the problem. Her voice dropped. Then maybe something didn't change. Ryan looked at her. What do you mean? Maybe something was always there, she said slowly, and we just didn't see it. The idea landed wrong. Because it suggested something worse than a mistake. It suggested ignorance. Ryan straightened slightly. That's not possible. You don't run a division at this level without knowing who holds authority. Vanessa didn't argue. But she didn't agree either, because deep down she felt it too, that something had been overlooked. Ryan's phone buzzed again, another message. Not internal this time, unknown number. He hesitated for a second before opening it. Just a line. Simple, controlled. Verification is progressing. Please refrain from unilateral decisions. No signature, no name. But the tone, it wasn't a request. Vanessa noticed the shift in his expression. Who's that? Ryan locked the screen. Doesn't matter. But it did. Because whoever sent that message was watching. And they weren't asking. They were reminding him of his place. For the first time in years, Ryan felt like he didn't know the structure he was standing inside. Like the ground had always belonged to someone else. And he had just been walking on it. Vanessa exhaled slowly. Okay. Then we adjust. We wait it out. Once verification clears, everything goes back to normal. Ryan nodded. But he didn't feel convinced, because something about the word verification felt final, not temporary, as if it wasn't confirming something new. It was revealing something that had already been decided. Across the city, Claire sat alone at a small table by the window of a quiet hotel suite. Not luxury, not like the penthouse, but clean-controlled, safe. Her phone rested in front of her, unread messages stacked on the screen, most from unknown numbers, some from legal, some from internal contacts she hadn't responded to yet. She picked up the phone slowly, opened one. Martin, status update required. Before next phase, Claire read it once, then again. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She didn't reply immediately, because this was the moment she had been preparing for. Not emotionally, but strategically. For years, she had stayed quiet, small, unnoticed. Not because she had nothing, but because she had chosen not to use it, until she understood what she was standing inside, what her marriage really was. Now she knew. And now the structure was shifting, because she had allowed it to. Claire finally typed a response. One line. Proceed. She hit send, then placed the phone down. Outside the window, the city moved like nothing had changed, but she knew better, because somewhere across that skyline, Ryan was still trying to figure out what was happening to him, still trying to hold on to something he had never truly owned. Claire leaned back slightly, her expression calm. Not cold, not cruel, just clear. For the first time, she wasn't reacting to his decisions. She was making her own. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Board session confirmed. Attendance required. Claire read it. And this time she allowed herself a small, quiet breath, because the next step wasn't about verification anymore. It was about presence. And once she stepped into that room, everything Ryan believed about power would collapse. Ryan didn't go home right away. He stayed in his office long after the building had started to empty, the city lights replacing daylight through the glass walls. The silence around him felt different now. Not peaceful, exposed. His laptop screen still showed the same documents he had been reviewing for hours. Ownership charts, holding structures. Legal entities layered on top of each other, like a maze designed to confuse anyone without clearance. He had always understood the system, or at least he thought he had. Now it felt like he had only been looking at the surface. Vanessa sat across from him, heels kicked off, her patience wearing thin. "You're not going to find anything like this," she said. "Not at your level." Ryan didn't look up. "I'm not at a low level. That's not what I meant." He finally lifted his gaze, tension sharp in his expression. "Then what did you mean?" Vanessa held his stare. "I mean whoever's behind this, they're above you, above all of us." The words landed harder than they should have. Ryan closed the laptop slowly, because that was exactly what he had started to suspect, and it didn't sit right. He had spent years climbing, positioning himself, building influence. And now, suddenly, there was someone above him he had never even seen. Someone who could freeze his authority with a single move. "That doesn't just happen," he said quietly. "Not without a reason." Vanessa leaned forward. "Then find the reason." Ryan stood, walking to the window. The city stretched below him, familiar and distant at the same time. For a moment, his mind drifted uninvited back to Claire, to the way she had stood there that night. Calm, too calm. He shook the thought away. That didn't make sense. Claire had no connection to this world. no influence, no leverage. She had walked away with nothing. That's what he had told himself. That's what he believed. Behind him, Vanessa spoke again. You need to secure your position before this goes any further. Ryan turned back. I can't secure anything until I know what I'm dealing with. Then push, she said. Force clarity. Talk to the board. Talk to Martin. Don't just sit here waiting. Ryan considered it because she was right about one thing. Waiting wasn't his style. But something about this situation, it wasn't responding to pressure the way normal corporate conflicts did. It wasn't reactive. It was controlled, as if someone else was setting the pace. His phone buzzed again. Another internal update. Mandatory board session. Time. Tomorrow morning. Ryan stared at the screen. There it was. Not a discussion. Not a negotiation. A directive. Vanessa saw it. That's it. That's your chance. Whatever this is, it gets addressed there. Ryan nodded slowly, but the unease didn't leave, because something about the way everything was unfolding felt less like a meeting and more like a reveal. Across the city, Claire stood in front of a mirror in the quiet hotel suite. She adjusted the sleeve of her blazer, smoothing it down with a steady hand. Nothing about her appearance was extravagant. No jewelry beyond a simple watch. No statement pieces. Just clean lines. Intentional choices. The kind of presence that didn't need to prove anything. Her phone rested on the table behind her, silent now. Everything had already been set in motion. Martin had handled the legal alignment. The board had been notified. Verification had been completed. Claire hadn't rushed any of it. She had waited, watched, listened, long enough to understand exactly what she was stepping into, and exactly who Ryan had become. That part still sat somewhere deep inside her. Not anger, not even pain anymore. Just clarity. She picked up her phone, scrolling briefly through older messages, unread, unanswered. Some from Ryan, short, dismissive, transactional. Nothing asking how she was. Nothing wondering where she had gone. That had told her everything she needed to know. Claire locked the screen and set the phone aside, because none of that mattered anymore. What mattered now was control. Not the kind Ryan had tried to hold over her, not the kind that came from money alone, the kind that came from understanding, from patience, from knowing exactly when to step forward. A soft knock came at the door. Claire crossed the room and opened it. A man in a tailored suit stood there, posture straight, expression respectful. "Car is ready, Miss Hale," he said. Claire gave a small nod. "Thank you." He didn't ask questions, didn't linger, because he knew who she was. Even if the rest of the world, especially in rounds. She stepped into the hallway, the quiet of the hotel wrapping around her like a final pause before everything shifted. In the elevator, she stood alone. No rush, no hesitation, just stillness. The doors opened to the lobby, and she walked out without drawing attention. No one there knew. No one needed to. Not yet. Back at the office, Ryan finally left the building close to midnight. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Every reflection in the mirrored walls looked slightly different, like he was seeing himself from angles he hadn't considered before. When the doors opened, the lobby was nearly empty. Just a few late-night staff. A quiet echo of footsteps. Ryan stepped outside, the cool air hitting him sharply. For a moment he stood there, looking up at the building. At the glass, the height, the presence. Everything he had associated with success, with control, with ownership. A flicker of something unsettled moved through him. Not doubt, not yet, but something close, because for the first time he couldn't say with certainty what any of it actually belonged to. His phone buzzed again, a final message for the night. From Martin. Brief, direct. Attendance is not optional. Ryan stared at it for a second longer than necessary, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. Tomorrow, whatever this was, it would come to a head and he would walk into that room, prepared, confident, in control. He had to be, because the alternative was something he wasn't ready to face. Across the city, Claire sat in the back of a quiet car, watching the skyline pass by through tinted glass. The same skyline Ryan had just stood beneath, the same building rising above it all. But she wasn't looking at it the way he was. She wasn't measuring height, or status, or success. She was looking at structure, at ownership, at what was real, and what had only ever been assumed. Her phone vibrated once more, a final confirmation. Board session locked. All members present. Claire read it, then closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to steady herself, but to mark the end of something. Because when she walked into that room, she wouldn't just be Claire anymore, and Ryan would finally understand what he had thrown away. The car slowed as it approached a private entrance. Claire opened her eyes, calm, ready. And for the first time since that night, she allowed herself to step fully into the truth she had kept hidden. Tomorrow she wouldn't stay silent. Claire didn't return to the penthouse. She never even considered it. The space had already told her everything she needed to know long before she left it. It had never been a home. Just a place where she had been tolerated, managed, and slowly erased. Instead, she chose something smaller, intentional. A quiet brownstone on a tree-lined street, owned through one of her private entities but registered under her own name this time. No layers, no disguise. For the first time in years, nothing about her life required permission. Her mornings became simple. Coffee by the window. Documents spread across a real table, not a polished marble surface meant to impress guests. Calls with teams who spoke to her directly now, without hesitation or filtering. They knew who she was, and more importantly, they respected it. Not because of her inheritance, because of the way she made decisions. Didn't rush expansion. She didn't chase headlines. She redirected resources instead, quietly restructuring parts of the company that had been bloated by ego and shortcuts. She funded projects that had been overlooked, people who had been dismissed. It wasn't about proving anything. It never had been. It was about building something that didn't require anyone to shrink to fit inside it. Across the city, Ryan's world had narrowed. Not overnight, but steadily. His position had not collapsed completely. That would have been too easy, too clean. Instead, it shifted. Responsibilities reduced. Authority questioned. Invitations fewer. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. He had misjudged something fundamental, and it had cost him. Vanessa didn't stay long enough to watch it unfold. The moment it became clear that Ryan's influence was no longer rising, she adjusted. Quietly at first, then completely. By the time he realized it, she had already aligned herself elsewhere. Someone safer. Someone with upward momentum. Ryan didn't fight it. He didn't have the leverage anymore. What stayed with him wasn't the loss of Vanessa. It was the memory of Claire. Not the version he had rewritten in his head. The real one. The way she had stood there, calm while everything around her tried to diminish her. The way she hadn't argued. Hadn't begged. At the time, he had seen it prove anything. At the time, he had seen it as weakness. Now he understood it differently. He saw her once, from a distance, a board gathering. Not one he had been invited to speak at, just to attend. She walked in without announcement. No grand entrance, no performance. But the room shifted. People stood straighter. Conversations paused, decisions waited. Ryan stayed where he was, because for the first time he knew exactly where he belonged in that room, and wasn't beside her. Claire didn't look for him, she didn't need to. Their story had already ended the moment he decided her worth was tied to what she appeared to have. Later, when the meeting ended, she stepped outside into the late afternoon light. There was a quiet to the moment. Not empty, just settled. She had everything she once thought she needed to prove, and yet none of it felt like the victory she had imagined years ago. Because the real shift hadn't come from the inheritance, it had come from understanding what she would no longer accept, what she would no longer tolerate, and what she would never again try to earn. Her phone buzzed off softly in her hand. A new proposal, a new direction. Another decision waiting for her. She glanced at it briefly, then looked up instead at the city, at the life in front of her, and for the first time there was no weight attached to it, no expectation, no need to be seen a certain way, just clarity. Ryan remained on the steps long after she left, watching a space she had already moved beyond, understanding, too late, that he had never lost her to money. He had lost her the moment he believed she had none, and by the time he realized what she truly held, it was never something he could have taken. If you've ever seen someone for less than they are, ask yourself what you might have missed. And if this story stayed with you, share where you're watching from and what you would have done in her place.